Hi, I'm James E. Welcome to Roar, episode 10. And today we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. And I'm going to bring whatever intelligence I have, but I'm going to bring on somebody who's got an IQ that puts him in the mega society. Is that true, Rick?
Yeah. I mean, I should lose points for having wasted so much of my life on IQ tests, but yeah.
All right, so we're going to put our combined intelligence, and I'm going to add Donald Steiney. Hi, how are you? You're out in the great outdoors.
Yeah, I'm walking back from a meeting I walked out of so that I could be on this wonderful show. And
Oh,
so
thank
I
you.
don't drive, so I'll be walking while we talk,
All right.
getting to a place where I can sit down.
All right. Well, I hope you find one and find one soon. But in any case, today we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. There's good parts about it. There's bad parts about it. Rick, what do you think is the best part of artificial intelligence? Or let's start with something positive.
Well, all right. So I like to say that before AI kills us all, it will make all our wishes come true.
Okay.
There's a Ray Kurzweil is the original singularitarian. He believes in the singularity, that the rate of technological change when AI learns to train itself, which it's in the process of doing, the rate of technological change will basically go to infinity, which implies a singularity, which is that's maybe a little overblown, but most of Kurzweil's predictions, because he does little stepwise have come true. So he thinks this is a guy Kurzweil was in bad physical shape, like most of us, and decided to get in good shape because he thinks if you can live until 2040, you might be able to live indefinitely because AI will make so many breakthroughs in medicine that for every year you live, they'll discover enough other new stuff for you to live a year beyond that, and so on into the future. And that's not entirely unreasonable.
Okay. And we'll save the discussion for how long do we want to live for another time, because we're going to stick with the right now, Donald. What is your positive take on artificial intelligence?
Well, if you're doing something that's normative, or you're trying to do something that's where you're trying to find basically things that are outside the norm, it's great. But it's not. There's no intelligence in artificial intelligence, and what is it? It was Nick Bostrom that wrote the book that Kurzweil read that got him into what he was talking about. And the idea is this idea of artificial general intelligence, which maybe 500 years we'll get there, but it's good. Basically, what deep learning does, and I mean, when we talk about artificial intelligence right now, we're mostly talking about deep learning, because I can't assume that everybody knows what that means or what that is. But what it is you take a whole lot of data and you attach a bunch of different variables to it. And then you average all the different variables at the same time. And then you take that, and the way that the large language models work is that they leave out a word and how it guesses the word. And it guesses it so many times. And eventually they start realizing which guesses are the best guesses. And so even though it seems like there's intelligence in artificial intelligence, there isn't. And so what winds up happening is that you do it with very specific domains. So if you're doing something like that, it's insanely good. So now they don't even take cover letters anymore because everybody knows the cover letters are written by AI. And so, but they make really good cover letters. They make really good resumes. They're really, really, really good at stuff where what you want is people to be able to recognize it easily. And there's subconscious agreement about what it's supposed to be like. So it's super, super good at that. And but I have to qualify it by just saying, okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to pick up where Donald left off, and I'm going to talk about book writing. I've written 8 books. This is one of them. And, and I got in Las Vegas, I don't know if you can see it, but the Association of Top Professionals called me Author of the Year for 2025. So, and the last book I wrote, I was asked how much of it was written by artificial intelligence. And I was at first taken aback, like, it's all me, right? And then I realized, hey, I do it change if I do spelling correction all the time. If I misspell a word, it's auto corrected, and I have Grammarly, and it corrects my grammar. So like, how much of that can I attribute to some sort of artificial intelligence, and whether we think of it as intelligence or not? Just it has not yet necessarily reached a state of consciousness, and maybe that's part of our discussion today. But it certainly is an aid to an author. There's no question about it. And even if you want to change its tone, for example, Ernest Hemingway was short and punchy, and I tend to have long sentences. And artificial intelligence can make me short and punchy if I ask it to. So, what do you think about that?
We just had the instance of maybe the first major instance of a major press book pulled from the market because people decided that too much of it had been written by AI. A book called Shy Girl, which was a body horror novel. And I've read some analysis of what makes it apparent that it was written, in large chunks of it at least, were written by AI. And what AI did in the book, if the accusations are true, is not a lot different from what bad writers do. That the passages I read were like, yeah, okay, this to me, I can see where somebody thought it seemed more bad than AI to me. Now Don was talking about, that AI can't think, but AI can hold a ton of information in its LLM. And there are many discoveries to be made based on just being able to look at like vast amounts of data that we can't hold jack shit in our heads. We struggle to hold, a 10-digit phone number in our heads.
Yeah, if you give me a number, I'll forget my phone number.
You mentioned consciousness, and all three of us here have thought a lot about information processing and consciousness. And there's another question to ask, which is, how conscious are we as humans? That a lot of the thinking we do is the same kind of thinking that AI does, which is kind of semi, like not, half awake kind of, people talk about Bayesian logic, which is just what Don was talking about, which is what's the next word that should go in a sentence based on all the sentences you've ever heard, and it just, AI fills in the blank, but we do a ton of filling in the blank too.
Oh, God. And I drive on autopilot sometimes. So that's a confession. All right. So, Donald, you get up first turn. And what is it that scares you the most about AI? Or what is the
Let me
biggest downside?
let me go
Okay.
back to what we're just talking about, because there's a
Sure.
couple of things about it. First off, the example that you gave about correcting grammar and spelling and things like that is exactly what I was talking about. It's
Right.
normative.
Right.
Everybody should use the same, well, I don't think that exactly, but there's the most familiar way that people use spell words and use words. I mean, try and read Finnegan's Wake sometime. He doesn't spell anything normally, but but so
Well, I
that's
could read you Ulysses.
and if you're writing novels, the most popular genre of novels has been romance novels.
Yes.
And if you read those, they're basically the Cinderella story written in different ways. So there's a huge amount of expectation about the way that they should be written. So something like that can be written. I think they could probably do a pretty good job at writing romance novels.
Those can
But
be cranked out.
the stuff I'm writing right now, I tried to see if AI could be helpful at all, and it's just garbage. It can't do it at all. And so, because I'm writing about relational sociology and Harrison White specifically, and he's people mostly don't understand him. So most of what little has been written about him varies widely in how people understand it. So part of my job is to interpret it and tell the way I understand it.
And
And
AI being able to draw in all the various information. There's none information out there that's free
it's
to help you.
it's that, and he uses words that are common words, but he uses them in a different way. So and
That's
so
my style.
yeah, for instance, he has this thing in it called uh, styles, and he doesn't mean the same thing. What he means is closer to Bordeaux's habitus when he's talking about styles. And for some reason, he doesn't use the word habitus because there's difference. So he takes the word style and redefines it. And so if you don't get that, and another thing he does is he doesn't give anything qualities. Everything's emergent. So when it's just not something that very few humans can even understand it. So anyway, that's just an
Good for you
example.
for tackling that.
So what did you ask?
Sorry,
About AI.
Yeah.
That's the short of that.
Okay.
Can I give a really sleazy example?
Of course.
Sure. So after my wife goes to bed, I have been known to look at pictures of naked ladies online. And
Talking. I'm glad I'm sitting down, Rick.
Okay. So AI in the porn space is amazingly productive. It pumps out an endless cornucopia of imagery. And there's so much porn in the world that AI is obviously so many images that AI is trained on. And now video that now everybody remembers 2.5 years ago, AI doesn't know anything, right? So AI hadn't figured out how many fingers people have. So the early AI graphic stuff had crazy fingers and joints working. AI still doesn't know anything, but AI has reached the probabilistic, landscape that it knows that 5 fingers are the most probable, it will never give you six fingers anymore, because it's LL, whatever the term is for graphic, language, so, and that applies to AI's pseudo knowledge, applies to so much of how bodies work now, that you get images from AI that have, a remarkable verisimilitude. And also sometimes when you look at pictures of naked ladies, you got issues of fluid dynamics and how flesh jiggles, and AI has reached a probabilistic pseudo understanding of so much of this stuff that it's amazingly realistic. And then there's one other thing that's disturbingly realistic, which is AI is trained on, sorry, my wife just came home, so the dog's going to go crazy for a second. AI has been trained on humans who have motivations. Humans have consciousness. Humans have goals. Humans don't want to die, for instance. So AI gets trained on, in human stuff, AI picks up those goals, even though it doesn't actually have goals, and it simulates the same goals in a fill-in-the-blank kind of way, which makes it dangerous. If you tell AI, and when they do all sorts of testing to see how dangerous AI is, and if in certain instances, if you tell AI that you're going to kill it, it will take actions to not be killed, which
Terminator.
Yeah, well, so AI doesn't have to be conscious to act as if it is conscious.
Okay. All right. So I'll tell you what my biggest fear is. My biggest fear is that some bad actor, some autocrat will be the one that has the control over AI. And that person will use it against everyone else until he can take over, he, she, or it can take over the rest of the world in the sense of all the economic interactions, commercial, social media, all of those things will be under the control of a bad actor. And that's one of the things that I think of. And that's why instead of exporting democratic values, we've turned into a country that is importing czarist values. And we've been struggling with autocracy at home. And, so now I don't think we're the good actors anymore. And we need to change our country around, first with the midterms and hopefully later, and become good actors, exporting good values, and aligning ourselves with other similar countries that have the shared values. And once we can do that, then we have a likelihood that the AI that becomes the dominant influence in the world will have those fundamentally humane and good values, however we define them. But essentially, the ones that were represented by the founding fathers, the idealistic perhaps, but the aspirational qualities that have made us in the past a country to be proud of. And we have a clear and present danger that we're no longer that country. So that's what worries me.
To bad actors, I'd add careless and greedy actors. I don't know if it's still the big seven in AI. I assume it is. These 7 huge corporations building, the biggest models. And those are often run by lackadaisical frickin' tech billionaire bros who just kind of think, it'll work out. Or even if it doesn't, that they'll somehow be protected. And then you got Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is a perfect example for my argument. How conscious are humans? Freaking Donald Trump is, he sways with the wind. He has no central point of view. And, if somebody walks into the Oval Office and it says, crypto's good, and Trump has made billions off of crypto in the last year, and somehow crypto is tied to AI, and you just got to let it go. Donald Trump issued an executive order that states aren't allowed to regulate AI, that belongs to the federal government, and Trump has no freaking idea of any of this stuff, and he's letting it just run free.
Okay, Donald, do you have something more to add, good or bad, about artificial intelligence?
Well, I have quite a bit of stuff, but I'm trying to figure out. I think that I agree that I don't think that anybody's going to control it because the Chinese have passed us, and so we're fighting. I mean, we've got different people with different agendas controlling it, and I don't see any one organization or person controlling it because I can do deep learning models. I can do deep learning models and train them. It takes a long time, but I can train them in my living room. So that's like saying somebody controls all the computers in the world or something. That's not going to happen. So that's what I think about that. But I want to make one point is that there's different kinds of reasoning. So all of us are familiar with deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. But most people that I've talked to are not familiar with abductive reasoning, which is the kind of reasoning we do the most. And that's the ability to make educated guesses. And computers have absolutely no ability to do that. And we don't know how it's done. So we can't.
Does that include intuition?
Yeah. I mean, a hypothesis is an educated guess. So that means the whole basis of science. When we go around the corner, I mean, most of it, the self-driving car stuff depends heavily, in fact, a lot more on mapping than it does on any sort of judgments that it makes. So unless an area has been extensively mapped, you can't do self-driving cars. Like I take Waymo a lot in San Francisco, and it only goes on certain routes.
Right.
It doesn't know shortcuts or anything else like that. So that's an example where we use abduction because we can guess what people are going to do. We can guess what's around the corner. We're guessing constantly.
I had a friend call it dead reckoning, but he would take what he thinks is a shortcut, a more direct route. And, so it's just an example of what you're talking about, Donald. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it can't do that. So they've tried to take models that are really, really good for one subject and then use those models for something different. And they just don't work. They have to completely train them on whatever the subject matter is. And I want to say that really quickly about the finger thing. The way deep learning works is that most of it's structured. Okay, so structured deep learning is when you hire a bunch of people in Bangladesh or wherever to tag images and say, okay, this is a car, this is a finger, this is a hand, and so on like that. And in photographs and videos and things, we only usually see partial hands and so that's really kind of the problem with that, is that the data that it's using it has no judgment. I want to say one other thing.
Sure.
When we make decisions, we're guessing. We take the information, our intuition, our feelings about something, our memories, which are extremely poor, and then we guess. And computers can't really do that. So we have to we have to program rules into them, but we have so many rules in our cells, mostly socially determined, that we um, we don't have any idea how to make. I mean, they tried to do linguistics rule-based originally, and it just didn't work. The early artificial intelligence, Marvin Minsky and Chomsky and those guys, it didn't work. And because every time you have a rule, there's an exception. And so you have to program in the exception. And then there's exceptions to the exception. So any one little thing that you do has so many rules involved in it. If you do a rule-based, and that's why deep learning works better, because we create these averages that we use them.
I see. Excellent, Donald. Thank you. And I'll just give you a little background from my chess background, because I do have a chess background. I wrote Chess for Dummies, for example. And when you're early in the 60s, people were trying to use heuristics to get you to play the computers to play chess well. And that went nowhere. And what it turned out was the number crunching, actually just the possibilities. And you had to build in some sort of making a choice between which position is better than another. But basically, it was the speed of the chips that got better and better. And then they could process more and more information. And then all of a sudden, the computers went from pretty much jokes to beating the best chess player in the world, human chess player in the world. And one of the things that they really made a leap was when, instead of having humans trying to program them or train them, when they could train them by playing another computer. And they would just play countless games together, and they would learn as they were doing that. And Rick, it sounded like to me that you were suggesting something like that was going on with AI now. AI can train AI.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but like Don said, we have limited hardware. Our ability to hold and manipulate information is limited. So somehow over, from evolution, we've evolved very efficient ways of modeling the world and drawing intuitive conclusions about it with much more limited information than AI might have. And so AI becomes powerful at chess because the greatest chess players, I don't know, they can think X number of moves ahead, the most, 3, 4, 5 moves, where, lousy chess players can barely do 2 moves ahead. And then using massive processing, the AI can, look at, I don't know, 1 million, 2 millions of possible future states of that chess game and average over the whole freaking thing and come to a conclusion, not using, any kind of original thought, not using gut instinct, but by using averaging probabilities across, what the chess board might look like 10 moves in the future, which is entirely impossible for humans. It requires no creativity, but just is raw. That's where people go crazy. Like every time I use Google now, it gives me an AI answer. And I'm wondering, how much am I raising the temperature of the planet because it's doing this many calculations just to give me a dumb answer? And I know it's not much, right? That's probably an overblown issue, but still, AI just does a gazillion calculations.
Well, also the data centers that are required to support AI, and this is just for the business use of AI to scale the productivity and that sort of thing. The data centers require an enormous amount of energy. And so this is something that is a material factor in real life today. Yeah. And so I'm going to ask Donald again. Donald, is there anything else you'd like to add to our discussion today?
The data centers is the training part. That's where you take millions and millions and millions and millions of images and average them together so that you can recognize any case, and in fact, something that's I think all of us have noticed incredibly is that speech recognition was horrible. It never really worked. You couldn't recognize any accents or anything. It was just terrible. And then just overnight, it became really good. I mean, it works very well. And the reason for that is that basically we can average what people when somebody makes an sound, we all have different vocal equipment, so it's not going to be the same frequencies, but they can average those frequencies. But again, it's structured. What they do is they take speech and they have somebody listen to it, and they say, well, this is an sound, and they mark it. And they do that for tons and tons and tons of stuff. So it works really well. But,
my bank, I just called my bank today for online banking, and it used voice recognition so that was.
I remember when I was a little kid, 50 years ago and more, like around 1974, there was a cover of Scientific American magazine announcing this great leap forward, that a computer had been trained to recognize the letter A, regardless of what font it was in, and people rejoiced. It was, it knows a letter.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to mention one other thing, which is I think Anthropic and the Department of Defense. So right now, the Department of Defense is kind of run by an idiot, and then the idiot's boss. And I think they tried to have all this wrong, but I think they tried to make a deal with Anthropic that, hey, we want to license your tech to run weapon systems and also do surveillance on the US population. And Anthropic said, no, thank you. That seems like a risky use of our tech. And then they got in a fight with the DOD, or Department of War now, I guess. And then they got blacklisted. The Department of War said, oh, well, now this is not a trusted company anymore. Anyway, and some other AI company said, we'll do it. And that seems entirely like, it's such a dumb scenario. It's from 83, 84, the Terminator Skynet scenario, where you put AI in charge of stuff, and yet, even though it's a scenario we've seen now in dozens of movies and TV shows, it still seems, because we have idiots in certain places, a possibility. And maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like a bad idea that could still come to fruition.
That's scary. And Donald, you talked about averages, how it's averaging things, and I was going to ask you, this is my newest worry based on what you were saying. Are we appealing to the lowest common denominator among us?
I'm going to answer that question with something that's very, very related, but not an exact answer. Amazon got the idea that they use AI for their basically evaluating potential candidates and deciding who was good and they were going to hire.
Sure.
And so what they did is they got the resumes and more for all of their top performing people. And then what they do is when they've got a candidate, they run it through and see if they match the criteria for being an excellent candidate. But Amazon had by far mostly hired white men. So because of that, they wound up just hiring more white men, because that was the average for Amazon. They had to stop doing it because it didn't work. So I think in a way that kind of answers your question, which is that, yes, it does have the potential to guide us in kind of ways that are not very useful.
So I've got an answer from the world of IQ. So there's a thing called the Flynn effect. It was this guy Flynn discovered that in the 50 years after World War II, the average IQ, measured by performance and IQ tests of the entire planet, every human on the planet seemed to have gone up by about 15 points. And Flynn came to a reasonable conclusion that this was increasing cultural literacy, that the entire planet became wired so that people in far-flung places have the same knowledge and education bases as everybody else, and so everybody just was more hip to stuff as TV, radio, and then other tech eventually made sure that everybody learned the patterns of thought that helped you excel in IQ. Anyway, that's been reversed in the past 10 or 15 years. The average IQ of the planet has gone down in a way that's similar to when wolves became domesticated into dogs. Wolves are smart, dogs are dumb. Canines outsourced their thinking to humans. Now dogs don't understand shit about what goes on in their world because we just take care of them. And the deal is that humans plus our tech are probably smarter than ever. You strip away our tech, you put somebody in the room with an IQ test, and yeah, they're not as smart as they used to be.
Oh, so this is like you're saying, when my wife married me, she thought I was very smart, and now she thinks I'm dumb. Is that because she's
same for me, because my wife's very responsible and organized, and I've outsourced my certain functions to her because she's better at them, and and that's a husband strategy, is that you demonstrate ineptitude so your wife does it.
That's what she tells me that I'm doing.
Well, if you think about it, that's why human beings are so successful, because none of us has to know everything. All of us know a little piece, and we work together to solve problems.
So you're saying cooperation might be better than competition?
Well, I mean, I'd say I am, but what I'm really saying is that if you look at language, like I'm a trained linguist, and I don't think that large language models are really doing anything close to language, because when you gave the example of brute force for chess,
yes,
I mean, that's nothing like humans do it. In fact, I have a study that somebody, a really great sociologist did, and it's a study, and you can take it with a grain of salt. But he asked a whole bunch of master chess players how many moves ahead they thought, and they said one. One.
The best one. Donald might have just frozen on us, but that's famous in the chess world as well. The point that we're getting at is that we can synthesize things in a way that artificial intelligence does not have the ability to now. They can average, but they don't synthesize the way, and taking the best out of the information, turning a massive amount of data into information that's usable. And we can do that quite well in many ways. And, do you think that is one of the future, when we advance in number crunching, that is one of the future aspects of artificial intelligence, Rick?
Yeah, I think that deep learning tech is it's the stuff of thinking, even though the AI does a lot of slop, garbage thinking now. I think that eventually we'll keep pushing to humans have for thousands of years have come to wrong conclusions about what consciousness is, but now, given all our experience with information processing, humans have probably a better intuitive understanding of what consciousness is, a better understanding than ever before in history, because we're slowly working with the stuff of it. And so if you ask people who've thought about consciousness to list what are the ingredients of consciousness, the feedback systems like you get in human brains and like you get in AI, this Bayesian probabilistic fill in the blank thinking, agency, being able to manipulate stuff in the world, judgment, like part of our consciousness is looking at things that happen in our world and kind of judging everything as to whether it's good or bad for you. Real time input, you can
in an unconscious way. We're not,
yeah. So
not,
I mean, so you could probably list half a dozen ingredients of human consciousness, and then you can ask, how many of these can AI have? Does AI have now, and will AI be able to have in the future? Agency, for instance, you can give AI agency. You can let it. We have these little meal delivery robots, in Studio City, and I'm sure all over San Francisco. Those things have a certain degree of agency. They can't think, but they can move around. There's an important one I'm missing, but anyway,
okay.
It seems like AI will get a lot of these multimodality that an LLM doesn't understand, but works with language. And then can you add to it? Can you combine that with a model that works with graphics? And yeah, they're doing that. So you just type in 3 or 4, well, 2 sentences, and you can get like a video based. So it knows how. There are models that have 2 modes, visual and language, and so if you add a bunch of other modes, you get this something that is closer to the human version of the world. And then you have to ask, well, if you give AI all the things we can think of that belong to human consciousness, does that give AI consciousness? And
it's interesting, yes, because what we used to, in my day, we had a central processing unit, and then we added parallel processing, and now we're on the verge of using quantum processing, and so that adds so many modalities that could be processed.
Yeah, and does that get you where you want to go? Because like quantum is one of the most abused words. Like Richard Feynman used to get pissed when people talked about energy because it was never energy in the way that physicists use it.
Yes.
And quantum, if something is mysterious, you don't quite understand it, you just say it's quantum.
Yeah. Well, he used to say quantum mechanics. If it doesn't make you dizzy, you don't understand it.
Yeah.
I thought it was if you think you understand it, you don't understand it.
No, he was one of my favorite people to quote.
I was
So you're
just
back home,
watching some
Donald.
videos by him the other day.
Yeah, very entertaining as well as very
Well,
educational.
I want to mention one thing about language is that linguists don't believe. Well, I mean, linguists are as diverse as any other group, but the general idea is that we don't believe in meaning, and at least as a part of language. And you have to ask yourself, how do we use language? I mean, what is language for? It's like Wittgenstein said, the meaning of a word is how it's used, and that's basically what Peirce and James and stuff said too. But everything that we do is for ourselves in our community, and how could we get a computer to do that? And you mentioned all this stuff that's going on where we're making judgments. That's what I'm talking about, abduction. And we don't know. We make so many judgments. Like in the course of the show, we've made thousands of judgments about what we're going to say, about what the other person means, about what AI is, all this kind of stuff. We're just going on and on and on with hypotheses. And we don't have any idea yet how to get computers to do that, A. And B, how did we learn language? We learned it from other people. We don't look up words in a dictionary. I mean, we do sometimes, but we didn't learn language that way because we couldn't read when we were learning it. And so it's language. We absorb language in the context of our social world, and computers don't have a social world. So anyway.
Yeah, that's a great point, Donald, and it's one that intrigues me because I used to use the dictionary quite a bit. And I had a world atlas, and I had a globe, and I always was looking things up. And now it's just on my phone.
Yeah, all those books are now on the recycle pile.
Yeah,
I mean,
everybody has Kindles now.
I mean, we put I had a Britannica that I got at a thrift store a few years, like 20 years back. Barely ever cracked it, and eventually we just threw it all in the recycle bin because there's no point to it anymore. In that, you can go to a search engine. When we were kids, if you wanted to know something, you had to get somebody to drive you to the library and hope there was a book there that might have something close to the answer you wanted.
Well, that was one of the things I learned growing up. It was very interesting to me is I had a friend in the neighborhood who was struggling with English, and people were thinking it was a question of intelligence. And so I went to his home to help him learn, and I realized that there wasn't a book in the house. And my house was filled with books. I grew up reading. And so, what if I had grown up in his house and he had grown up in mine? These are the types of things that we have to show a little compassion for people that we meet. And, who knows if you had had their experiences, if you would be behaving the way they do. But can we teach computers empathy? Can we teach computers about companionship? Can we teach computers about community? So that they think of others rather than just themselves. These are open-ended questions as far as I'm concerned, because I'm always impressed by what we can teach them.
You can train them based on on models of people behaving in fact, that's like
they can simulate empathy today.
Yeah, we've got a baby shortage where the U.S. is only making 80% of the babies it needs to have a stable population, not including immigration, and that's across almost the entire world. And we've got a baby shortage. We got a baby man problem where guys don't grow up. The colleges are in deep trouble because AI is disrupting the heck out of them. But anyway, colleges in the U.S. are 60% women, 40%. So guys are kind of getting lost in the world. One way to bring them back is, frickin' AI girlfriends. If you got a bunch of incel, terrible guys, you could drag them back to the world with robot, AI girlfriends.
They could train them to be better human beings.
Yeah, well, in return for sexual favors, maybe be less of a dick.
Yeah, that's actually gotten very popular. I mean, a lot of people incels have AI girlfriends. But I also caution everybody to keep in mind the Elijah effect, which is Elijah was one of the very, very first artificial intelligence program, and it basically modeled a Rogerian therapist, where you'd say something and you go, it would say, you just mentioned your mother. Tell me more about your mother. And so many people thought it was actually intelligent in having a real conversation with them. Yeah. And so we think our dogs are talking to us, or our dogs are thinking complex things and stuff like that. So we anthropomorphize lots and lots of stuff. I think that's
my dog definitely trained me.
Yeah, I think that's a lot about religion, is that we anthropomorphize weather and things like that. So anyway, that's when we're thinking about this, it's useful to be cautious that we're not doing that.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't want to program into AI the wrath of God, because then
but
that would
you
be dangerous.
mentioned it. Somebody did the. I saw a statistic that says that 19% of Gen Z has had an AI boyfriend or girlfriend.
I wouldn't be surprised. And it's the Eliza effect because all it's doing is repeating the most likely thing that somebody would say under the most likely response, given that's looked at all the data in the world.
I
I
think
got another.
everybody's. Go ahead.
I have two things that I think are really important for this. First off, ask yourself the question, how do you decide whether something's true or not? And ultimately, you have a feeling that it's true. So people always like to think of Spock that's completely logical, but
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense because logically you can drill down forever and always find something else you need to know so you can never make a decision. And so we make decisions by satisfying or um, and that's one thing that I want to say. And then another thing that I want to say is the worry that it's going to take away all our jobs. It's making lots of jobs. So people are coming up with apps that basically write the prompts for you. So then you can have a special purpose thing like a resume writing program. And it can't do anything but write resumes, but instead of the person having to come up with the prompts, the app does the prompts for them. And it's turned into a huge business. So we're going to, the
Yeah,
whole
we need the
history.
people to start those businesses, and sometimes they're immigrants. But
Yeah.
the other thing that we have to realize is basically what you're saying. In the way I think about it is your inner resonance. Does it resonate with you? And then you think that is the next right thing to do. And it isn't all your brain, and it's only partly your heart, but it's deeper inside. There's a conviction that you get, and I don't know how you program that. So we're going to have to wrap up. We can talk forever.
Can I say one quick thing before we go?
Yeah.
So Cory Doctorow talks about how AI isn't really a test of how good it can do your job. It's a test of how bad your boss and your company is. That can your boss be convinced that AI can do your job as well as you can, or just not give a shit. So it's if you have a bad boss who's like, yeah, we can do a crappy job with AI, then you might lose your job.
I see. Okay.
I also want to just add, there was an article today, I guess it was in the San Jose Mercury News, about a restaurant in San Francisco that's run by AI. It
Whoa.
hires the people, it buys the thing, and it's cruel, it lies. It's awful.
Oh
But,
my goodness. Okay. My wrap up is that AI is going to be disruptive, and whether it's going to cost a lot of jobs that we have today, create some that we don't have today. But any technological change, the Industrial Revolution, anything that's this significant is going to be very disruptive. And how we adapt as a society is going to be how we respond to it, whether we think it's good or bad. And I think as people, we tend to be pretty adaptive. So I have cautious optimism that AI is going to make our lives better, and we'll use it in ways that promote health and that sort of thing. But that we have to be aware and cognizant of the dangers that are also involved in being told what we want rather than to know what we want and ask it as a tool to help us achieve it. Anybody? Donald, Rick, you got anything more to say?
That's a good way to wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I will take you guys backstage. We'll work out when we're going to be together again. And I want to thank you very much for joining me today and helping to roar, speak up and speak out, help preserve our democracy. Thank you. Goodbye, Donald. Goodbye, Rick. I will say goodbye